I was reborn back to when I was 5, on the day I got kidnapped by traffickers. The trafficker had a balloon in one hand and was trying to force me into his car with the other. Cousin Becky pushed me away and bravely faced the kidnapper. "I'll go with you." I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. She wanted to be taken like I was in my previous life, sold to a faraway big city, adopted by wealthy parents, and live a life of luxury and indulgence. But she didn't know what awaited in the next 20 years. In my past life, Becky watched as I got taken, and did nothing to save me. I was sold to a rich couple who couldn't have kids, while Becky took my place in our family, and became my parents' cherished daughter. Later, the factory reformed, and my parents lost their jobs. Life wasn't as good anymore, but they still tried to meet Becky's every need, even if it meant working as street cleaners to put her through college. Yet, when we reunited 20 years later, she had nothing but complaints about my parents. "You don't know the life I've had," she said. "No AC in summer, no heat in winter. Once we almost got carbon monoxide poisoning. They're not like they were when you were a kid, stingy now. They weigh every decision, even buying meat. A talent scout wanted me for an ad, but they refused, saying the industry is dangerous for girls. They just didn't want me to leave them behind if I got successful." Even though she complained like that, with her smooth skin and clean clothes, she hardly looked like she had it rough. "How about introducing me to your adoptive parents? I wouldn't mind starting in small roles." When she said she wanted to meet them, I firmly shook my head. I couldn't let her fall into the hands of those wolves. I didn't expect she would envy me for it. The day I won the Best Actress award, she rushed to my car and stabbed me. White turned to red. There I lay in a pool of blood, my heart no longer beating. Even in death, I couldn't understand. After her parents died unexpectedly, it was mine who took her in. When there was good food or fun things, I shared them with her first. When others made fun of her for being an orphan, I fought them. How could she repay my kindness with such hatred? I thought I'd never get to avenge it. But I was reborn. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to age 5, the day I was taken. Becky clutched the trafficker's arm tightly and pushed me to the ground. "I'll go with you. I promise I won't cry or scream. Taking her would only bring you trouble. She's sickly with a weak heart. She could die out of fright, and you'd be stuck with a murder charge. Take me, I can get you more money." As I watched this unfold, I looked around in disbelief. 7-year-old Becky, the balloon-selling trafficker, and my blue dolphin balloon. This scene, which haunted my dreams, was now happening before my eyes. I touched my pigtails and pinched my arm. Ouch. I really came back. And on the day I was taken in my past life. Back then, Becky and I went to the park, and she argued with another girl over a doll. I was distracted by the balloon seller, took the balloon, and he grabbed me. "Sis, help me." I screamed while Becky dropped the doll and ran toward me. But she stopped midway and stayed put, even as I was taken. The trafficker took me to a city I'd never seen, selling me for 20,000 yuan to a rich family. From then on, my life was filled with abuse, confinement, and I never felt any warmth in the world again. Watching Becky now, eager to leave with the trafficker, I snickered. If she wanted my former life, I'd help her get it. Seeing hesitation in the trafficker's eyes, I faked a heart attack, clutched my chest and lay down. "I think I'm having a heart attack. Take me to a hospital." Becky was stunned for a moment, not expecting me to play along. But she seized the opportunity. "Doctor said if she has another attack, she needs a transplant, or she won't live a month." Hearing this, the trafficker only took Becky into the car. Before driving off, he spat at me bad luck. From the back seat, Becky waved triumphantly at me. I got up, brushed the dirt off, singing to myself. She was the first to rush into the fire pit. Soon she'd learn. Those adoptive parents seemed kind, but what they did was dark and cruel. They'd make me a free servant, cleaning, doing chores, serving them tea. If my adoptive dad drank, he'd get handsy. I'd resist only to be beaten. When older, I tried running away but got caught and locked without food or water for days. At 18, I became a money maker, sent to strangers' beds repeatedly. In my past life, I couldn't escape. This time, Becky would become their new source of income. After Becky disappeared, my parents searched desperately, with ads and flyers, yet no sign of her was found. Surveillance was not advanced then, and our small town had no cameras. After a while they gave up too. But me, since that day, I cried and fussed from time to time, making my parents think I was scared. "Why don't we move? Maybe a new environment will help Wanwan's condition," said my dad. At night, my parents sat in the living room, lit only by a dim floor lamp. My mom glanced toward my room, nodding silently while tears rolled down her face. A week later we moved. Before leaving, I threw the only picture of Becky in the house on the floor. The movers stepped on it multiple times as they carried our things out. Watching her face get twisted and deformed delighted me. "Becky, I hope you can smile like that 20 years from now." After I got lost in a past life, my parents moved with Becky at her behest. They quickly quit looking for me and poured all their love into Becky. They nurtured her and gave her everything she wanted. 20 years later, I found Becky. She held my hand with a guilty look, saying, "I was scared stupid back then. I didn't mean not to save you. I'm just glad you're back." When I was little, our parents were willing to sell blood to buy me a piano. They were so good to me. Even though I wasn't their biological daughter, they'd be even better to you. I waited with high hopes in their cozy home to reunite with my birth parents. But when they got home, they looked at me like I was a stranger. They refused to acknowledge me. My dad pushed me out the door. "My daughter died long ago. Stop trying to con us." I was heartbroken, but I didn't dare call the police. Raised by those foster parents, I ended up doing shady things like them. Reporting it, I'd be dead for sure. I felt abandoned by the whole world. Obediently, I returned to my foster parents and resumed my old life. Blood ties, it's just something nice to say. After moving, we rented a place, and my parents made ends meet by doing odd jobs. Life was hard, but I truly felt what it's like to be happy as a person. Later, my parents borrowed money to open a small shop. My dad was exceptional at making noodles, and my mom was diligent and clean. They got along well with the neighbors, and gradually, we had many regular customers. Our tight days turned comfortable. At 15, I excitedly ran home to show my dad some news. "Dad, let's join this platform and do delivery." At first, my dad was against it, but couldn't resist my daily persuasion. He registered for online orders and started selling online. Business boomed, and our chain expanded all over the city. We even owned a factory supporting dine-in, delivery, and at-home meal kits. Overnight, the Ean family became one of the top business titans. With more money and connections, we met more people. I didn't expect my efforts to change our lives would also bring Becky back into my life 2 years early. Our company was seeking an ambassador for new products. The PR firm selected some female celebrities who matched our brand image, arranging a final interview round. The moment the meeting room door opened, Becky shot up from her seat. "Why are you here?" Her face was a fleeting mix of shock and disbelief. I glanced at her coolly without replying. "She's in charge. Whether you get this gig depends on her." Her agent tugged at Becky. Though surprised, with so many people around, Becky had to play along. She bowed apologetically to me and slowly sat back down. "Sorry, I mistook you for someone else." I eyed her disdainfully, turning to my assistant. "Let's start with her." Becky sneered at her agent. "Wasn't this supposed to be just a formality? What's going on? You want me to perform?" She jabbed a finger at me, full of defiance. I barely looked up from her profile. "No." Then next. "Fine, I don't care about your stupid job." She grabbed her bag, kicked a chair, and stormed out. Her agent chased after her, pleading, "Calm down. If you don't secure this, you'll go back to." Becky spun around, glaring at her agent. "Back to what? It's just one more guy their parents want me to sleep with. I've done it for years, what's one more?" David isn't any ordinary man. His reputation as a deviant is notorious. Many girls nearly didn't make it, the agent warned. "Don't worry, I've got this," Becky replied. In her past life, she'd seen the news about David and me, but they were all about how he proposed and how harmonious our life was. "You have to win this deal," the agent urged. "Why? I bet our agency you'd win it. Without it, they'll blacklist you, and your family won't help you." Becky looked through the meeting room glass at me. Our eyes locked openly. "Becky, do you now feel how heaven and hell can be just one thought away?" My gaze scanned the remaining 3 girls in the room. Her, I said, pointing to Carrie, the nervous newcomer in the corner. Are you sure? My assistant was surprised. Carrie is new, with no resources, no background, no fame. Seeing my resolve, he whispered cautiously, Boss, she has no projects except an unknown comedy show online. You really want her? I rose, gazed at my assistant for 3 seconds, and he quickly stepped aside. I'll set up a 1-year contract right away. I had my hand frozen on the doorknob and turned to give Carrie a look. 5 years. Carrie looked at me with tears in her eyes. I gave her a slight smile and said, Good luck. I thought Becky had left, but she ambushed me right outside the conference room. You think I can't live without this ad, huh? I couldn't be bothered to waste time on her. I tried to leave, but she blocked my way. Lucy, you remember who I am, right? I pretended to think. Sorry, I just can't place you. Maybe you got the wrong person. She grabbed my wrist. Lucy, quit this amnesia act. You're the one who let those traffickers take me. I chuckled, shaking her hand off. It's hilarious, really. You wanted to go with them back then. Did you forget? I looked at her with a smirk. How's the high life treating you? Enjoying that dark, windowless room? My words shook her to the core, and she glared at me with reddened eyes. You've come back too, didn't you? I just smiled, saying nothing. Suddenly she got aggressive, pinning me to the wall, hands around my neck. You knew they'd torture me and make me entertain those disgusting old men. Why did you do this to me? I was having a hard time breathing, but the smile never left my lips. In our past life, didn't you do the same to me? Her grip loosened suddenly. She staggered back, guilt flashing briefly before her face twisted again. You owe me this endorsement. I almost laughed. How could she be so shameless to say I owe her? I didn't want more drama, so I turned to leave. She started screaming behind me. If you don't give it to me, I'll go to Mom and Dad. They'll give it to me. I picked my ear. Mom and Dad? They're dead. How are you gonna ask them, huh? Go underground. In the past life, they sold blood for me. And in this life, they won't abandon me. She said, pushing past me, disappearing around the hallway corner. I dusted off my blazer. I'd love to see how a dead person convinces my parents to take her back. Shooting the ad went smoothly. Carrie's a diligent girl. Her expressions and lines, perfect delivery. After filming, the director couldn't stop praising her. But in the week following the ad's release, nothing much happened. Carrie was pretty unknown after all. Maybe we should get Becky to save the day. Her reputation's sorta bad, but she's still got a fan base, my assistant said, holding campaign data, trying to convince me again. Before he finished, the marketing director burst into my office, super pumped. Boss, we've hit the jackpot, we really did. He connected his tablet to the office TV. Carrie's web series just dropped out of nowhere and blew up. Our product's her exclusive endorsement, and it's flying off the shelves. Distributors are ringing off the hook. The marketing director paced back and forth in excitement, while my assistant looked at me, mouth agape, giving me a thumbs up. You're awesome, boss. I calmly kicked them both out. I knew it would turn out like this. I had a hand in the release of that web series, actually. In the past, Carrie blew up because of this low-budget web series. The plot was silly and rebellious enough for instant fame. Her sweet looks, funny and bright personality, plus her on-point acting, she was unforgettable and became a TV ratings guarantee. Promoting her also had another agenda, crushing Becky, ending her reign as the industry queen. Every opportunity meant for Becky, I snatched and gave to Carrie. I elevated her to top influencer status. Rumors swirled that we were a couple, and I had sponsored Carrie. I wasn't against the rumors. They actually helped protect Carrie, making sure nobody dared mess with her. Consider it a little compensation for using her. Eventually, we got to know each other better, and really clicked, growing to be good friends. I picked up my parents from the airport. As we drove out of the parking lot, someone darted in front of the car. I slammed the brakes, almost throwing my mom from the back seat. Before she calmed down, loud banging came from the rear door. Mom, Dad, it's me, Becky. I got out and pulled her away. Stop it. Take off while I'm being nice. Ignoring me, she went for my mom's hand. Mom, I'm Becky, I'm back. Mom was still shaken. Becky's sudden grab scared her even more, and she couldn't even spare her a glance. Becky's been dead for ages. What are you trying to pull? Dad said coldly, shielding Mom. Dad, don't you remember me? Becky's voice was full of desperation, eyes tearing up. It's me, your daughter. You spoiled me, loved me. How can you not recognize me now? Tears spilled over as she spoke. My sister died a long time ago. Her grave was even paid for by me. I calmly laid out the story I'd spun years back. I knew Becky would eventually try to reunite with my parents. So 2 years ago, I hired a couple from the countryside to act out a little play. I came up with a lie that Becky was adopted by them and perished in an earthquake. After, I gave the couple some money and had an empty tomb built next to Becky's real parents' grave. Finally, my parents let go of their guilt over Becky. Hearing that, Becky gave me a death glare, biting her lips as if she'd tear me apart any second. I didn't understand why she was so upset. I simply repeated her old trick from our last life, with a slight twist. She went berserk, shaking my arm violently. It's you. You took everything from me. A loud slap echoed next to me. My mom actually slapped her. In my previous life, my mom treated her like she was made of glass. But in this life, she's bold enough to slap her. Becky held her swollen face, completely stunned for a moment. Mom, you slapped me. Don't call me Mom. I only have one daughter. If you're sick, go to a mental hospital. If you harm my daughter again, I'll fight you to the death. Seeing my mom so angry, I kind of forgave her a little. Even though in my past life she ignored me, in this life she's really been good to me. We left amidst Becky's cursing. Even after walking some distance, we could still hear her yelling hysterically. Wait and see. You'll regret this. Whether we'd regret it or not, I wasn't sure. But I knew Becky would regret going to David. That support isn't as simple as she thought. Becky walked out of David's villa, battered and bruised, only to be caught by paparazzi. Suddenly, she was all over the trending headlines and gossip columns. Everyone knew Becky was out selling herself. Carrie, dressed in a high-slit black backless dress, sat with David in a club, watching her trend with a drink in hand. Happy. This paparazzo isn't great. The angle's off. Can't even see the bruises on her face. I crossed my legs, my toes brushing against his leg teasingly. In my past life, David almost destroyed me. And even though Carrie didn't know the whole story, she offered to help repay me. In the past, my foster parents were hooked on gambling. They owed a massive debt at David's casino. And when they couldn't pay it back, they turned to me as their pawn. They cleaned me up, wrapped me like candy, and sent me to David. I begged my foster parents, anyone but David, please. But they didn't listen. They locked me in a hotel room like a lamb to the slaughter. And David tortured me, leaving me covered in bruises. Damn, it tricked me, he said, and grabbed a whip, lashing me twice. I was so beaten up, I could barely tell where it hurt. Later, my foster parents just kept losing, and I was handed over to him, time and time again. Over time, David developed a bit of pity for me. He invested in the TV shows and films I acted in, giving me some face in public, as long as I didn't piss him off. But when night fell after the shooting, I was always terrified. Every time, he came up with new ways to abuse me. The louder I screamed, the worse it got. If I stayed silent, he got furious and hit even harder. Until that day when he was on top of me, hands choking my neck, shouting, "I'll kill you." I struggled desperately and in the chaos, grabbed something hard from the headboard and smashed it on his head. He clutched his head and fell beside me, his face bloody. I panicked, hurriedly dressed and tried to leave, but feared he might really bleed to death. Gathering my courage, I went back, wrapped a towel around his wound, and cleaned the blood off his face. In all those years tortured by my foster parents, at least I'd gotten pretty good at first aid. The bleeding stopped, and he sat leaning against the bed. "You've got guts," he chuckled instead of being angry. I stood by the bed, shaking, my mouth opening and closing, but unable to make a sound. "I'll look out for you from now on. Anyone who dares to bully you will pay." That's when I realized he had this whole masochistic thing going on. And that's when I stopped getting beaten and turned him into my little lapdog. But Becky had no idea about any of this in her past life. Carrie wore headphones, following my instructions to trace a finger gently over his hand, then deliberately left 2 scratches on his arm. David licked the wound with a smile. Not satisfied, Carrie pouted playfully. She could walk out of your house on her own, you know? That's upsetting. That's easy to fix. David, charmed by Carrie, called Becky's foster parents. Bring that bitch to my club now. Whatever was said on the other end made David furious. Damn it, I said bring her. So much talk, if she can't walk, let her crawl. Carrie pretended to be scared, eyebrows knitted, shrinking into herself. Seeing Carrie afraid, David instantly softened, putting his hand on her shoulder. When she flinched, he quickly backed off. Babe, did I scare you? My bad, my bad. He slapped himself a few times. Carrie sipped her drink, pouting, come on, that wasn't even loud. He suddenly slapped himself harder, and seeing Carrie still unamused, he motioned for his right-hand man Ken to come over. Hit me hard. Ken hesitated, looking at him without moving. Lame. Carrie stood, grabbing her purse, ready to leave when suddenly there was a loud slap. The sound echoed through the room, even startled me on the other end. Man, Ken really brought it. No idea if the bones cracked from that. Damn hard hit, David said, raising a fist toward his underling. But Carrie just laughed her high-pitched giggle. When she laughed, David lost his temper completely. He leaned over to Carrie with a grin. Becky's real show's yet to start. Don't you leave now. Oh right, I forgot. The show's about to start. Becky was dragged into the club by her foster parents. I ducked into a back room when they came inside. David, we brought her, now about that money. As long as she makes me comfortable today, I'll lend you guys $5 million. When they heard the $5 million, Becky's foster parents' eyes lit up. They left her on the sofa and walked away, completely ignoring her. I still have some work to do, take your time. Carrie hid the bug in the room and left. Inside the room, Becky curled up on the sofa. Her eyes were full of terror and despair. I won't scream or fight, can't you just not hit me? She begged him, unaware that David loved women who cried and screamed. If she stayed quiet, how could David have fun? 2 slaps came through the headphones. What right do you have to negotiate with me? David never held back when hitting women. An hour later, she was taken away in an ambulance. A paparazzo I knew got this exclusive and couldn't stop smiling. The next day, I brought flowers and fruit to visit Becky at the hospital. Her foster parents were there too. Sister, I finally found you. I threw myself on Becky crying. Her vocal cords were damaged and she couldn't speak. Lying there covered in bruises, she couldn't move much even if she tried to resist. Really, thank you for taking care of my sister all these years. I dried my tears and pulled out a card from my pocket for her foster parents. Here's $2 million. It's a small token from my family, please accept it. Hearing it was only $2 million, they immediately gave me a dirty look. Becky's foster mom rolled her eyes at me. $2 million? You're treating us like beggars? I pretended to be embarrassed. That's all the cash we can spare right now. Fine, I'll take this first, but you owe us more. Becky's foster dad pocketed the card, but her foster mom quickly snatched it from him. I don't trust you with it. I don't trust you either. They argued over the card right in front of me. It was like watching monkeys perform. When they were about to get physical, I stepped in. I closed the hospital room door carefully, talking softly. No need to fight. I don't have more money, but I've got goods. If we transport them, I can split the profit with you. How much? I held up a finger. $1 million. Becky's foster mom covered her mouth, thrilled, not wanting anyone to overhear. Greed was all over Becky's foster dad's face. He rubbed his hands together, almost drooling. I held back my disgust and told them the pickup location. The next evening, they showed up right on time where I left the goods. But they didn't take it to the agreed place. I expected this all along. There was nothing illegal in that bag anyway. They were flaunting the goods at the scene. David's right-hand man, Ken, whispered in my ear, making me ticklish. I cupped his face and kissed him. Not good if people see. His face turned red like an apple. I got up, stood in front of Ken, put his hands on my waist and kissed him again. I don't care, I need the energy. I teased, pecking his lips a couple more times. After a short moment, he picked me up and began kissing me passionately. It was a long time before he finally let me go, reluctant. We should get back to business, darling. He went back to the club, and I went to the convenience store across the street, watching David's room with a laptop. Ken knocked on David's door, placing the black briefcase we hid before on the table. We found that missing shipment. David was groggy but perked up hearing that. Slapping the table, he demanded, "Who dared mess with my shipment? Feed him to the fish." David had Becky's foster parents brought in. They knelt in front of him, pleading, "We didn't know it was yours. Please spare us. We'll give you all we earned." Opening the bag, David saw half the contents were gone. Ignoring their pleas, he ordered his men to beat them up, make them disappear. David was still drunk, slouching on the sofa. I watched Becky's foster parents being dragged out like dead dogs, feeling quite satisfied. After a few screams, they were thrown into the sea in sacks with stones. I closed the laptop and went to the club's entrance to meet Ken. We walked down the street holding hands, police sirens wailing behind us. Ken hugged me close, and I nuzzled against his chest. Finally, it's all over. David was sentenced to death for illegal trade in fake goods. Becky's foster parents were saved just in time, but jailed with no hope of release. Becky, who helped distribute goods for David multiple times, acted insane to avoid punishment and was sent to a mental hospital. When I saw her again, her hair was wild, eyes empty, muttering in the corner. But seeing me, she suddenly snapped, grabbing a lamp to throw at me. If Ken hadn't pulled me into his arms, I would have been badly injured. "You need to be more careful." Ken gently stroked my hair, his voice full of affection. His tenderness was melting me. Becky realized too late. In her past life, he was with David, wasn't he? Yes, but it was too late for her to remember everything now. In my past life, I was almost broken by David's torture. It was Ken who brought warmth to my life. He was always quietly by my side, helping me with my wounds and telling me to have hope. In my dark world, thanks to him, there was finally a crack. The moment sunlight streamed in, I finally had hope for life. But in my previous life, I didn't deserve to be with him. After my rebirth and our family situation improved, I persuaded my parents to go to the orphanage. I spotted him right away, sitting in the last row of the room. "Dad, it's him. He'll be my husband. I want him to be my childhood groom," I announced. The headmaster chuckled and said, "Your daughter has a good eye. Ken is the best behaved and top student among these kids." I insisted on taking him home, because of course, I needed to nurture my future husband from a young age. Ken's eyes widened at my words, as if he was looking at a lunatic. He outright refused to come with us. I cried and made a scene, while my parents tried persuading Ken for a long time, saying he'd just be like a brother to me. Only then did he reluctantly agree. In the car, I held Ken's hand, rubbing my cheek against his arm repeatedly. I wanted to snuggle into his arms like a kitten, and quietly let him pat my head. That's how he used to comfort me in our past life. I had missed that familiar feeling so much. Ken didn't refuse. Instead, he turned his face towards the window, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, with a blush creeping up his ears. I knew he liked me. After college, Ken became a cop, but soon got kicked out and ended up being David's henchman. We had a huge argument. I found him hoping he wouldn't go down the same path as in our past life, but it still didn't work out. I couldn't understand why. Despite changing everyone's fate, his remained the same. It wasn't until he risked his life taking a knife for David, trying to become his confidant, that he finally revealed the truth to me. Turns out, he was an undercover cop sent to gather more criminal evidence against David and bring down his operation. Due to my quest for revenge, we naturally started cooperating privately. He regained his position as a cop, and I finally stepped out of the shadows of my past life. 5 months later, Ken knelt down on one knee, holding out a ring. "So about that childhood groom thing still counts?" The end.